Top 15 Dangerous Teens Reacting to Serving Life in Prison. Watch these young criminals face the harsh reality of a lifetime behind bars. From explosive outbursts to shocking displays of indifference, their reactions will leave you stunned. Stay tuned for the jaw-dropping main body and see how these dangerous teens cope with their life-altering sentences. Don't miss it. Unpredictable, intense, and jaw-dropping. Witness the raw emotions and shocking behaviors of these young criminals as they receive life sentences in our riveting countdown of the Top 15 Dangerous Teens Reacting to Serving Life in Prison. From fiery rants to bizarre reactions, this gripping compilation will keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned for the main body and get ready for an emotional roller coaster like no other. 15. Nicholas Cruz. After a jury last month failed to unanimously recommend the death penalty, disappointing and upsetting many of the families of the 17 people he killed. The shooter who carried out the Parkland school shooting was officially sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release. Nicholas Cruz, 24, will serve a life sentence without the chance of parole for each of the 17 counts of murder to which he has pled guilty, according to the legally required punishment that Broward Circuit Judge Elizabeth Scherer imposed on him on Wednesday. The sentences will run consecutively. Cruz won't be able to profit monetarily in any manner from the crimes he committed since they were against Florida law, the court said. Until all expenses and restitution were paid, Scherer also garnished his commissary funds. The Florida Department of Corrections was subsequently instructed to take custody of Cruz. The judge thanked the relatives of the victims before imposing the sentence for allowing him the privilege of learning about every one of your loved ones. The personal accounts you have provided have made me feel as though I knew every one of them, and I can assure you that they won't be forgotten, Scherer stated. You all have shown such incredible resilience, fortitude, and grace during this process that I can't help but imagine how I would act or react if I were in your position. The judge said, I would do anything to ease your suffering or carry it for you. For just 5 minutes so you could breathe. Since I'm unable to comprehend what you go through every day, after 2 days of victim impact testimony, in which the families of the deceased and survivors of the February 2018 shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in South Florida confronted the gunman, they declared their fury that Cruz would not be executed. This marked the conclusion of the months-long trial that would determine Cruz's fate. 14. Zaric McCoy. Receiving a life sentence will incite rage. Do you still stand to lose much at that point? So if you have the court's attention, you may as well say your mind, which is what Zaric McCoy did. Despite shooting a couple of 16 times during the incident, both miraculously survived, and McCoy was found guilty. Even though he was found not guilty of attempted murder, McCoy was given a life sentence for the offense of causing significant bodily damage. He had no choice, the judge claimed. For his part, McCoy told the judge to suck your mom, rude boy, before being let out of the room. 13. Bryce Rhodes spit, swore, and yelled through his trial. Bryce Rhodes was a combative, volatile, and perplexing defendant when he went on trial for a triple homicide. One would anticipate Rhodes to be upset if he was given the choice between life in prison or the death penalty for his crimes. But he wasn't upset in the least. Rhodes made outbursts during the court hearings. He charged that the judge belonged to the KKK. Rhodes spits on a lawyer at one point. He dismissed attorneys, made illogical statements, and grinned mockingly at the relatives of his victims. The relatives of his victims insisted that the competency test was only a time-wasting tactic, despite the lawyer's claims to the contrary. 12. Danta Wright thought it was a joke. During murder trials, the family and loved ones of the victims frequently read impact statements. In the instance of Danta Wright, the mourning family of Jordan Klee, 18, was speaking while the accused murderer grinned and tried to control his laughter at the sentencing hearing. Wright addressed the court following the impact hearing and promised to return home soon. Instead, he received a 25-50-year prison term for the crime. 11. Ryan Stone bragged about his crimes. A life sentence can be shorter than 20 years in some jurisdictions. Others interpret it as at least 25. However, Ryan Stone was sentenced to 160 years in prison after giving police a 60-mile high-speed chase. Unsurprisingly, he was charged with several crimes, including attempted manslaughter and child abuse, because he carjacked an SUV that had a 4-year-old in the back. Stone attempted to blame his conduct on drugs, but during the sentencing hearing, Attorneys played recordings of Stone that had been made while he was incarcerated, and in which he boasted about making the headlines and how foolish his victims were. 10. Bass Webb spit on a judge. Bass Webb's sentence was prolonged when he continued to cause issues while he was incarcerated. He received a 50-year term for the murder of his ex-girlfriend before receiving a life sentence for a subsequent homicide. Webb was accused of attempting to kill 2 jail employees while he was incarcerated. Due to her familiarity with the victims, the judge in the case was forced to step aside. He spat at her in response. For the attempted murders, he received an additional 37 years, and he also faced prosecution for spitting on the judge. But what more could he possibly lose? 9. Erica Mae Butts screamed and hyperventilated. For the murder of a 3-year-old child, they were watching. Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham were put on trial. While Butts filed an Alford plea, which meant she maintained her innocence, but admitted that if she went to trial she would probably be found guilty, Cunningham submitted a guilty plea. The two presumably anticipated some kind of pardon, but when the judge sentenced them to life in jail, they got none. Butts experienced a full-blown courtroom collapse as the judge was reading the punishment. She screamed, passed out, and began to breathe heavily. Cunningham had to be taken out of the courtroom after fainting in the interim. 8. Manson Bryant freaked out in an angry rant. When the witness is called Manson, the trial can't be good. Manson Bryant was a career criminal who was found guilty of armed robbery in 2018, abduction, and other crimes. He spoke on his behalf during his sentence and discussed how he had made numerous poor judgments, how drugs had played a role, and how he was working to change. He hailed the court for its ruling and lauded the entirely legal system. After the judge sentenced him to 22 years, his attitude changed. Bryant quickly lost control and began to swear at the judge and the court. He yelled and cursed for a long period, using several F words. For his trouble, the judge added 6 more years to his sentence. 7. TJ Lane wore a t-shirt with killer on it. TJ Lane is the ideal example of a cold-blooded killer. In a school shooting, the 18-year-old was found guilty of killing 3 people and injuring 3 more. Wearing a homemade t-shirt with the word killer written in black marker, Lane appeared at his sentencing and was given a life sentence. He turned around in his seat throughout the trial to address the relatives of his victims, made a crude remark, and then gave them all the finger. 6. Diana Lovejoy passed out. TJ Lane meets the criteria for a cold-blooded killer. The 18-year-old was found guilty of shooting 3 people in a school, killing 3, and wounding 3 more. A homemade t-shirt with the word killer written in black marker was what Lane wore to his sentencing hearing, where he received a life sentence. He turned around in his chair to face the relatives of his victims at one point during the trial, made a crude remark, and then gave them all the finger. 5. Dexter Johnson threw a chair. The 2007 execution of Dexter Johnson caused the courthouse to collapse. Johnson already had a successful criminal career at the age of 19, but the murder and rape of Maria Paris and a subsequent crime spree with companions that also claimed the lives of 2 other people served as the breaking point. Others in the room shouted, passed out, and had to be taken away by ambulance as Johnson threw a chair and lashed out, forcing court personnel to tackle him. 2019 saw a stay of execution for Johnson while the legal system investigated his alleged intellectual handicap. 4. Shandal Jackson had to be pepper sprayed. Shandal Jackson felt furious when he realized he would be sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Nathan Potter. He cursed at the judge and the victim's family. He needed to be pepper sprayed and tackled by court officers. Unbelievably, Jackson's relatives used the occasion to condemn the victim's family as well, implying that they were to blame for Jackson's crime. 3. Trey Relford hugged his victim's father. Trey Relford did something that you won't see anywhere else, and it stands out as the most remarkable move in any case of a murderer being brought to justice. The killer gave the victim's father a hug in front of the judge, who could forgive the killer despite losing his child. 2. Michael Swanson laughed and smiled. Only 18 years old, Michael Swanson was facing a double homicide trial. He carried out a heist while killing a store clerk before committing the same crime elsewhere. Swanson chuckled after being declared guilty. As the court announced Swanson would serve his entire life in prison during sentencing, The convicted teenager started grinning. It's difficult to say that the judge's threat to give him any more time would have meant too much. 1. Alan McCarty was dragged away. Child custody was the initial reason Alan McCarty Jr. found himself in court. Then he declared that he would kill a judge. Whatever the case, his initial issues significantly worsened as a result of this threat and others he made against lawyers, including one's pregnant child. He was therefore given a 20-year prison sentence. Naturally, when McCarty heard the dreadful news, he lost it once more. He was pulled from the chamber after cursing at the court, calling the judge a liar and using racist epithets. As we conclude our journey through the unsettling world of young criminals facing life in prison, we can't help but be struck by the range of emotions displayed in the courtroom. From explosive anger to disturbing indifference, these individuals have left an indelible mark on the lives of their victims and their families. The justice system has spoken, and each of these teens will spend the rest of their days behind bars. While some reactions were expected, others left us in disbelief. These tense courtroom moments serve as a stark reminder of the consequences that come with heinous crimes committed at a young age. May this eye-opening experience inspire us to advocate for a safer society, where understanding, rehabilitation, and prevention take precedence. Let us strive to learn from these tragic tales and work together to foster a future where such heartbreaking incidents become a thing of the past. Thank you for joining us.